Okay, welcome to another Skull Sessions podcast. This is Dan Henk, and today my guest is Mark Patton. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, Mark. So let's talk a little bit about you. What are you up to, and what's going on?
Well, I'm fortunately retired. I've had a pretty checkered career. I went off to sea as a helmsman on a research vessel at 19. I became a police officer for 11 years. I was in marine mammal protection and fisheries enforcement for 2 years with the federal government.
Did you
And I
see
was
any
a
monsters like the Loch Ness monster or anything?
no, but I did spend
Kraken.
I rescued whales, and I spent a lot of time on the research vessel in the Bermuda Triangle.
How was
Uh,
that?
it's like a big wheat field of yellow orange floating sargassum seaweed that sticks out of the sticks off the surface of the ocean by about a foot, and it's just miles and miles of it. It's just like you're in
What
Kansas,
is
not
it in the triangle?
yeah, it's it all gathers there. It's a I can see why there's uh so many strange things associated
Yeah.
because it's a little like not being on the ocean.
So you just see like a portal to another dimension, or like
It could be.
battleships from like World War II and stuff,
Yeah, I didn't see any of that.
right?
Nope.
It's unfortunate, yeah. All right, so let's talk about you. I mean, I know that you've had a varied career, and now you're a writer.
Yeah, I retired and I didn't want to be buried yet, so I decided, I always liked writing. I wrote a book about, a sea story and then a police procedural and then one about a family funeral, which was pretty bizarre, which was truthful. And
Are
they didn't
those
get published.
are those available now?
I haven't gotten published, but if I did, they would certainly be out there. No, then I had the good fortune of sending a manuscript to Edge Science Fiction and Fantasy. That was The Haunting of Westminster Abbey, and that got accepted. And then the second manuscript, which I think we're talking about today, is Pish Taco, Lord of the Lost Inca Gold, and they accepted that too. So here we are.
Yeah, I looked that up on Amazon, and one, you seem to have gotten some really good reviews. But one thing people mention that I really like is that you do your research. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of like historical detail and like local detail. And I think too many people just wing it.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time researching. By no means am I an expert, but I think if I can go off on a tangent, what really got me going was a Smithsonian article maybe 5 years ago about how the Inca take care of their dead. And what they do is they started mummifying 1,000 years before the Egyptians, and they built pyramids at least 1,000 years before the Egyptians. And they had this culture where they believed that you had two lives. The first one was the physical life that we have right now. And the second one was your life after your death, as long as you are remembered. And to that end, they had their mummies in their houses of their relatives or buried them under the foundation of the house. All the bigwigs in any community had, their mummies were taken out and paraded around and they were given beer and things like that. And in Cusco, which was part of the center of the Inca Empire, which stretched from Ecuador down to the end of Chile,
Yeah, I've
uh,
been there. Yeah, the
yeah,
Cusco. Yeah.
they had nine palaces, and each time the Sapa Inca would die, he was the emperor. He had his own palace with his own mummy, with his own servants who tended to him. And in fact, one of the mummies fell out of disfavor, so the populace took him out and burned him, and that was the end of his memory. And when they conquered people, they went and took their mummies and brought them to Cusco. So they would have to come to
Wow.
see their mummies. So this second life thing got me going.
It's weird
And
because Cusco was so peaceful when I went there. Like llamas everywhere,
yeah,
stray dogs.
Yeah,
I had no idea of the history, but you never do.
yeah, anywhere you are, it's fabulous. But so I was thinking of this Second Life thing, and there was this boogeyman in the Amazon the Incas were, or the people in general were afraid of, called Pish Taco. He was a fat-eating, flesh-eating beast who would run around and attack you. I took that character and I took a lot of liberties with it. And I made him,
Why the name Fish Taco or however you pronounce it?
I pronounce it with a P like fish taco, and
Right.
I don't know how there's only one reference to it, and it was a Spanish monk who recorded the legend.
Okay.
But, so I took off on that and I made him the illegitimate son of the Sapa Inca who, uh, and this is based on truth, his grandmother was a witch. I mean, there was a witch involved in this. And when the Sapa Inca dies, the half brother comes in and he has to flee because the half brother is going to knock him off. And he learns greater witchcraft with his grandmother. And eventually he ends up in a city in the Andes hills called Paititi, which is like there's a myth of El Dorado in the United States, the city of gold that the conquistadors were looking for. And so
Which they never found. They
they never
killed
found,
tons and tons of people, but they never found it.
right. And Paititi is the same thing. But I've got him in the city of gold. And what happens is um, Pizarro, Francisco Pizarro, the conquistador, came down from Panama in 1531 with 168 soldiers. He managed to make his way to a small settlement, and the Inca emperor at that time, Atahualpa, knew he was around, so he went to see him. He wasn't concerned about him at all. And he went to see him with 5,000 troops. And he had an initial encounter, and
I've heard about that story. It didn't end well for him.
yeah, and he then 168 soldiers managed to ambush him on the second meeting, drive off his attendants, put a knife to his throat and hold him captive. And part of the problem was the Sapa Inca had been drinking the night before and had just had a hot bath, and he really wasn't concerned about anything. And surprise, he encountered horses and guns and cannons. And so they took him hostage for several years, and they demanded gold and silver. And they got everything they demanded, and they demanded more. And then finally, the Incas are beginning to rebel. They're getting a little nervous about keeping this guy around. By the way, he learned Spanish in that time, and he became an expert chess player. And they decided to kill him. It was Pizarro's decision. And
I heard
they,
that they no longer respected the emperor because now they felt he was a puppet of the conquistadors.
correct. And what they did is they gave him a choice. They would either burn him alive as a heretic, or he could be baptized and they'd garrote him. So he was baptized a Christian, and then they garroted him. But during this time, gold was coming down from the outlying communities, and there was a general in charge of this bringing it in. And this is a myth that's still around. When they garroted the Sapa Inca, the gold disappeared. So I have Pish Taco in the city of gold with the Spanish gold, and he is dead. And he lives by maintaining his terror throughout the communities, because that perpetuates his memory. And he's on top of this tomb that has a shaft that goes down to Ukupaka, which is their hell. And there's the devil down there, which is named Supai. And he's doing this just to taunt the devil down there. But below his where his body is down this channel or tunnel going downwards, there are a series of tombs. He had managed to grab the bodies of famous shamans in the area, and he put them in these little chambers, and he draws upon their power to increase his power. So I got that going. And then we go to Texas, and I have a Penelope Gertrude Augusta Facua, who is a modern day woman, a mathematical genius who stabbed her mother in her teen years and had been institutionalized. And her mother died, and she was released from the institution to attend a program at a university in Texas for the mathematically gifted who has suffered from mental illness. And here's where a second inspiration of the book. I have a Mexican in-law who is a professor at Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and he does medical research into schizophrenia. And he's got this machine he told me about. It's a skull cap with electrodes, and there's a TV screen, and there's a little red ball. And the ball goes up and down depending on your state of consciousness. So what he does is he teaches meditation to schizophrenics. And they're supposed to keep the ball, when they're in a true meditative state, dead center. And he says it's like weightlifting, that there's a deficiency in a certain area of the brain. And that if you
that thing sounds a little bit like Clockwork Orange, like when the guy has the thing on his head. Yeah.
Yeah, a little like that. And anyhow, so that's the point, is to build up this muscle, or not muscle, but brain tissue in order to no longer be delusional. And he also teaches a form of dreaming where you take charge of your dream. You have it's called lucent dreaming, and it's like in your dream, you might have a trigger word. So I'm dreaming and I see the color blue. I know I'm dreaming. Or, and so he does this in order to get you to manipulate your dreams and for him to get an inner insight into the way you're thinking. So this woman is a schizophrenic, and she's got 6 voices in her head that talk to her, and they're famous characters. They're people she's read in the history. Like Ada Lovelace, who was the daughter of Lord Byron, the poet, but she was a mathematical genius. And she helped build Babbage's computer, the first computer back in the early 18th century. We've got Ernest Shackleton, the explorer of the Antarctic, Rene Descartes, the mathematician who, as an aside, he built an automaton of his daughter when his daughter died. And he named her Francine after his daughter. And Queen Christina of Sweden asked him to come to Sweden to be a tutor. And he took this box with this mechanical daughter with him. The sailors found out about it. They threw her over the side, and they almost threw him over the side. But he and his daughter show up in this. And there's Seminole Indian chief Billy Bulleggs. There's Cecile Fatima, a voodoo priestess who was involved in starting the Haitian rebellion against the slave rebellion against the French. And there is Belle Starr, who was an outlaw cowboy woman who was jailed for horse thievery, and one day leaving a dance, somebody assassinated her. So she hears all these people in her head. And then I get her while dreaming. She has a cue, and she's got her nails painted black with skulls and crossbones.
Are these based, all these characters you just mentioned, are they based on like real characters?
They're all real people. Yeah.
Okay.
And so she sees the skulls and crossbones on her fingernails, and this gives her control. and things begin to get changed. And so you never know what's reality in the book, hopefully, and what's true, or if there is any truth or any reality. And she ends up on an airplane that crashes in the Amazon. And all the voices that are in her head suddenly are out as her companions as they struggle to get through the Amazon. And they meet a shaman, an Amazonian shaman in the bush, who tries to convince her to go to Paititi to kill Pish Taco, that it's necessary to kill Pish Taco. And she doesn't want to do it. There's a chapter on her refusal. Eventually, she's convinced by going to Ukapaka, where Supai is. And there's hallucinatory drugs involved because the shamans in that part of the world use a vine called corpse vine, and they make a brew out of it. So she ingests this with him, and they go down to the underworld together.
Well, I
Eventually,
know a lot of religions involve like the use of like certain psychedelics. Like they think that Christianity might have been a mushroom cult, like
right,
the whole burning bush and all that sort of stuff.
peyote, everything, yeah. So anyhow, that gets her on the quest to go kill him, and they're over this journey through the Amazon to the Andes Mountains, where Paititi is in the book. It's at the crest of the Andean Mountains where the Amazon comes up close, and there's a river journey that they take to get there, she and her companions, and then it resolves itself, of course, in Paititi. So there's a lot of dark humor in it. It's not just
Well, I
scary.
love that you have like so much technical reference and stuff. Like I
Yeah.
remember I read Jules Verne's like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea or 2,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and like there's all this like fauna under the water. And I was like,
Yeah.
oh, this is great that he enumerates all this stuff. And then I found out he made it all up.
Oh,
But I love that you have a lot of like the ancient lore and you have a lot of like real characters. It sounds like you did a deep dive into the research.
I've done diving. Yeah, I've been to. My wife and I got married in the Solomon Islands, and we went to an eco resort, which was just some cabanas way out in the bush, in the Morova Lagoon. It's a huge, the world's biggest lagoon, I think. It's just full of tropical fish and coral and sharks everywhere. And the natives dive
Which
with
are
the
actually usually not dangerous. People
right,
are more dangerous than sharks are than people.
right. And I stepped out into the water with my wife, and there was a French couple there, and I said, "How's the water?" And they said, "It's fine, but for the sharks." And I said, "What sharks?" They said, "Stick your head under the water," and I did, and they were everywhere.
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah, it was cool. At the end of the book, and I just bumped into this at the end of the book. There's a prophecy called the Quiros prophecy, and evidently, a group of Incas after Pizarro just basically destroyed the empire. The empire was 10 million people, and there was no starvation. It was really quite a thing. Roadways, 2,000 miles. With every 20 miles, there would be a hostel with people there to help you, like a hotel. And
Oh
anyhow,
yeah, I heard it's amazing. I've been to Machu Picchu. Been to Machu Picchu.
lucky you. I'd like to go. Maybe if this sells, I can afford it. But anyhow, um, so this group of Incas who fled the Spanish went to a mountaintop, and they've been there for almost 500 years. They weren't discovered until a bunch of um, scientists found them around the early 1970s. And they recorded something called the Quiros prophecy. And the Quiros prophecy is that 500 years after the fall of the Inca Empire, that all the damage done by the Spaniards would end, and there would be a period of peace and prosperity. And they called it when the eagle from the north meets the condor from the south. Well, I've got a character coming from the north, and I've got a character, Pish Taco, in the south. So I've got the eagle and the condor coming together. But that date would be 2023. So it's 10 years away. 2033, sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say Twitter would be right now.
Yeah, right. Not quite.
But yeah, no, it sounds awesome, man. Are you familiar with any of the theories of like Graham Hancock and stuff like that with like the ancient civilizations and like especially with like how like the ancient Inca might have been influenced by some earlier like his whole thing is he says we're a species of amnesia
Mhm.
because you know we all I don't know if you're familiar with the series, but like he says, like we developed to a point, and then like you know we'd have like a meteor strike and it would wipe out most of the advanced portions of
Mhm.
civilization, you know, and
Mhm.
then like the more primitive people would survive because they lived
Mhm.
in the middle of the country and on the edges. And then you know if you go to like Machu Picchu, you'll see like you know they have like boat docks there, but there's no lake nearby. But there was 12,000 years ago. So his
Uh-huh.
theory is like it was partially built and then the civilization was wiped out and then they rebuilt on the remains, which was incredibly common. People would rebuild the remains.
Yeah, it's interesting because in the Amazon now, everybody wrote the Amazon off. I know it's a natural wonder, and the people are relatively primitive. But they're beginning to find that they were had a very advanced civilization within the jungle.
Okay.
They they used wood, not stone, like on the coast.
Well, I've heard that
So
they found like buried pyramids and stuff there.
yeah, right. And a lot of it is decayed because of what they use. But they're finding these huge cities, and throughout the Peruvian cultures that came before the Inca, and the Inca probably had it as well. They had what they called the Fang deity. It could be the Nazca people, whomever. There were at least 20 different major civilizations that came and went. They had this Fang deity. It's a leopard, but there are no leopards in Peru. It came from the Amazon. And it managed to, they're beginning to theorize that possibly the coastal communities got their culture from the people in the Amazon whose civilization perished.
Yeah, the world's a lot stranger than I think it is. Like, you know, they found like Egyptian ruins in the Grand Canyon.
No, I
So,
didn't know
so the Egyptians made it here in ancient times.
that. Uh-huh.
Yeah, like I said, the world's a lot stranger than people think it is.
Right.
All right, man. So, is that your first book that you have out? Like you said, you have some stuff that has been published. Is that
No,
the
I
first
had
one?
I had another book that has been published, which is The Haunting of Westminster Abbey. And the gist of it is that there's a headhunter who lives in the attic of Westminster Abbey, who's called the Old Soul. And he's been around for thousands of years. But initially, he was a headhunter. And he is shepherding all the ghosts in the world. And the tombs, his office is up above, but in what they call the Triforium, which is basically the attic of Westminster Abbey. And below there are all kinds of, it's like Great Britain's attic. It's full of all kinds of dead people who've been stuffed in every corner. You name it, they're there. And so the book interacts a little with them. But the gist of that book is that human beings are just like the egg yolk for ghosts, that we're kind of the shell, the ghost is inside, and they're born when we die, and they go off into their real world. And we're just a way of getting them there. And so he interacts with them and interacts with a guy whose ghost has come unstuck. So he's alive, but his ghost is sticking halfway out of it. and all the other ghosts see it, and this Reverend Pota Peruti, who is this headhunter, sees it as well. And then I've got a group of witches who are all addicted to absinthe and are drunk half the time. And they're chasing this guy with the unstuck ghost because they want to find him and find out the secret concerning that, how he's got that, because they think it will help them in their life. So it's bent like me.
Well, it sounds like you kind of have like you have like a take on the genre where like it's like heavily imbued with like historical reference and like myth and lore and local legends, and you kind of bring that to life and add like a little bit of a supernatural element.
Mhm.
I think that's a clever take on the thing, and everything you've written sounds really interesting.
Thank you.
What's it available on? Is it available on Amazon, Kindle?
Yeah, it's August 1st. It's going to be available on everything. Right now, it's available on Amazon, and it's in paperback right now and Kindle, and also through Edge Science Fiction and Fantasy, my publisher.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Well, there's if you want to email me later, like there's some people that do audiobooks that do like a royalty share. So
Oh yeah,
basically you don't pay for it and they'll put it out, as an audiobook. It'll be like
that's
an Audible and all that sort of stuff.
that sounds great because I've got so many friends I've recommended the book to, but they say we don't read.
Right,
So
yeah.
it's a
Well,
possibility.
it's the same here. Like I put out books. I'm like, hey man, have you checked out my book? And they're like, yeah, I've read like one book in my life. I'm like, how did you make it this far in life by reading one book?
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, man. So I'm sure we could talk all day, but I don't want to keep you here. Give me like give me some info on how people can get a hold of you, where your social media is.
Okay, I'm on Facebook, and I'm also on Twitter, which what is it, X now? And
Yeah, that's right. It just got changed by Elon
changed.
Musk. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm Mark Patton, and if you're looking for my picture to sort me out from the thousand other Mark Pattons, is me holding a skull with two horns on it. And
Yeah, I looked you up on Amazon and there's another Mark Patton. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't think this is a guy.
wow, no, he's an academic.
Yeah.
But before you go, I want to show you. My wife's a cellist, and we live on top of a mountain in New Hampshire, about 6 miles from Canada. And we can see. I'm on the back porch right now. To my left is a mountain called Monadnock in Vermont, which is an extinct volcano, and below that's the Connecticut River. And 6 miles out, I can see Canada. So maybe I'll give you a quick tour with the computer here. Is that visible?
Oh yeah.
And then over there's Vermont.
Yeah, that looks awesome.
I bought 66 acres in 1986 for $35,000.
Wow. Yeah. Lucky
Can't do
you.
that. I went, I had to borrow a lot of money, but I figured it'd be worth it someday. And here I am.
I think it's totally worth it. Yeah, man. Well, thank you for doing this. I enjoyed having you on, and you definitely seem to know what you're talking about. You seem well informed, and I appreciate that. I think we need more of that. I think people just like bank stuff out and they throw it out in the marketplace, and there's not a strong foundation behind it.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate this opportunity. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, thank you.